April 10, 1815. On the island of Sumbawa in the Dutch East Indies, Mount Tambora exploded with the force of 800 megatons of TNT. The eruption was heard 1,200 miles away. Ships at sea mistook the sound for cannon fire and searched for vessels in distress. The explosion ejected a column of smoke and ash 28 miles into the stratosphere, 3 times higher than commercial aircraft fly today. The immediate devastation was apocalyptic. Pyroclastic flows racing down the mountain at 100 miles per hour incinerated everything in their path. The kingdoms of Tambora and Pakat vanished beneath 12 feet of ash. Tsunamis crashed into neighboring islands. Of the 12,000 people living on Sumbawa, only 26 survived. Another 60,000 died on surrounding islands from the eruption's direct effects. But this was just the beginning. Tambora ejected 38 cubic miles of material into the atmosphere, enough to bury Manhattan under 1,000 feet of debris. Most critically, the volcano spewed 60 million tons of sulfur dioxide into the stratosphere. There, it combined with water vapor to form 100 million tons of sulfuric acid aerosols, microscopic droplets that would circle the globe for years, reflecting sunlight back into space. The world had no idea what was coming. Throughout late 1815, spectacular sunsets painted the skies blood red across the planet. Witnesses described the sun appearing blue, green, and purple through the volcanic haze. These beautiful displays were harbingers of catastrophe. By early 1816, the aerosol veil had spread across both hemispheres. Global temperatures plummeted by 1.5 degrees Fahrenheit, seemingly small, but enough to shatter weather patterns worldwide. In an era before refrigeration, central heating, or global food distribution, this meant death. Spring never came to the Northern Hemisphere in 1816. In May, frost killed crops across North America and Europe. In June, 2 feet of snow fell in Quebec. Rivers froze in July in Pennsylvania. In August, ice formed on ponds in New England. Mary Shelley, vacationing in Switzerland, described it perfectly. It proved a wet, ungenial summer, and incessant rain often confined us for days to the house. Farmers watched helplessly as their fields turned black with frost. They replanted only to lose everything again and again. In New England, corn prices rose 800%. Hay became so scarce that farmers fed their livestock fish when they could find them. Most simply slaughtered their animals. Europe fared even worse. Already weakened by the Napoleonic Wars, the continent descended into its worst famine of the 19th century. In Switzerland, the government declared a national emergency. Starving crowds in Zurich rioted, attacking bakeries with cries of bread or blood. In Ireland, the failure of the potato crop forced 100,000 people to emigrate or die. Typhus, spread by lice thriving in the cold, wet conditions, killed tens of thousands more. The cold and hunger drove people to desperation. In Germany, bands of starving peasants roamed the countryside, digging up freshly planted potatoes. Authorities posted armed guards over fields. Parents abandoned children they couldn't feed. Reports from Bavaria described people eating cats, dogs, and rats. Some resorted to mixing sawdust and straw into their bread. China's Yunnan province suffered massive crop failures. The monsoon patterns, disrupted by the volcanic winter, brought floods to some regions and drought to others. The Yangtze River Valley, which fed millions, saw its rice harvest fail completely. Desperate farmers sold their children into slavery for a handful of grain. In India, the disrupted monsoons proved catastrophic. The late arrival of seasonal rains destroyed crops across Bengal. Then, when the rains finally came, they brought devastating floods. Cholera, thriving in the unsanitary conditions, exploded from its traditional boundaries in the Ganges Delta. For the first time in history, cholera became pandemic, spreading along trade routes to reach Europe, the Americas, and East Asia. The disease would kill millions over the following decades. The United States saw mass migrations as New Englanders fled their frozen barren farms for the Western territories. This sudden westward surge accelerated American expansion, but came at tremendous cost. Families loaded everything onto wagons and headed into the unknown, many dying on the harsh journey. Those who stayed faced starvation. In Vermont, people survived on hedgehogs and boiled nettles. The economic impacts rippled globally. The failure of crops meant farmers couldn't pay debts. Banks collapsed. Businesses shuttered. The price of grain in London markets reached levels not seen since the worst years of the Napoleonic blockades. Social unrest followed economic collapse. Food riots erupted from Wales to Württemberg. But from this darkness came unexpected consequences that would shape culture for centuries. In June 1816, a group of English riders found themselves trapped indoors by the incessant rain at Villa Diati on Lake Geneva. The party included Lord Byron, Percy Shelley, Mary Shelley, and John Polidori. Byron proposed they each write a ghost story to pass the time. Mary Shelley, just 18 years old, struggled for days to find inspiration. Then, in a waking dream, she envisioned the pale student of unhallowed arts kneeling beside the thing he had put together. Her story became Frankenstein, or the modern Prometheus, one of the most influential novels ever written. The book's themes of human ambition leading to catastrophe reflected the world outside their windows, where humanity's industrial revolution seemed powerless against nature's fury. John Polidori wrote The Vampire during the same gathering, creating the modern vampire genre that would eventually give us Dracula and countless other works. Both stories emerged from the gloom of the year without a summer. The volcanic winter influenced art beyond literature. J.M.W. Turner's dramatic paintings from this period capture the otherworldly sunsets caused by volcanic aerosols. The twisted, tortured skies in his works reflected not imagination, but observation. Caspar David Friedrich's lonely, apocalyptic landscapes similarly captured the era's desolation. The agricultural crisis sparked innovation. The failure of oat crops meant horses couldn't be fed, accelerating the development of velocipedes, early bicycles that would revolutionize personal transportation. The famine also drove agricultural reforms, crop diversification, and early experiments in food preservation that would eventually feed growing urban populations. Religious movements flourished in the crisis. Many saw the darkness and cold as signs of divine judgment. In New England, the Second Great Awakening gained momentum as desperate people sought meaning in their suffering. New religious movements emerged, including groups that would become the Mormons and Seventh-day Adventists. The political consequences reshaped nations. In Europe, the famine weakened governments already strained by war debts. Revolutionary movements gained support among starving populations. The social unrest of 1816 to 1817 contributed to the wave of revolutions that would sweep Europe in the following decades. Scientists of the era struggled to explain the global cooling. Some blamed sunspots. Others proposed that icebergs had shifted ocean currents. Benjamin Franklin had speculated decades earlier about volcanic effects on climate after the 1783 Laki eruption in Iceland, but his ideas weren't widely accepted. Not until the 1920s did scientists definitively link the year without a summer to Tambora. The death toll remains disputed. Direct casualties from famine, disease, and exposure certainly reached hundreds of thousands in Europe alone. When accounting for the global cholera pandemic triggered by the climate disruption, millions died. Some historians argue Tambora's eruption was the deadliest volcanic event in recorded history, surpassing even the 1883 Krakatoa explosion in total mortality. Today, Tambora serves as a warning. The volcano demonstrated how a single geological event could destabilize global civilization. In our interconnected world, with 7 billion more people to feed, the impacts of a similar eruption would be catastrophic. Volcanologists monitored dozens of volcanoes capable of producing Tambora-scale eruptions. It's not a question of if another volcanic winter will occur, but when. The year 1816 remains unique in recorded history, the only time a volcanic eruption provably altered the course of human civilization on every inhabited continent simultaneously. It gave us Frankenstein's monster and the modern vampire, drove westward expansion in America, triggered the first global cholera pandemic, contributed to the invention of the bicycle, and killed untold millions. Yet most have never heard of the year without a summer. In our age of climate anxiety, Tambora's story deserves remembering. It shows both nature's awesome power to reshape human destiny and our species' remarkable resilience in the face of catastrophe. The survivors of 1816 couldn't understand what had plunged their world into darkness. We can. The question is whether we've learned enough to prepare for the next time the Earth reminds us who really controls the climate. Mount Tambora still stands on Sumbawa, its summit crater a massive scar 5 miles wide and 3,600 feet deep. It remains active. Scientists say it will erupt again. When it does, despite all our technology and knowledge, we may find ourselves just as vulnerable as those who shivered through the year without a summer, wondering why spring never came.